apocalypse of Eastern Europe, blizzard after blizzard, we are still finally able to get Andrieh Blackwood to come on the show today. So before we get into the show, where are we located at, Mr. Zach?
We're located at 607 Gerrard Street East, Unit 401 and 2, Toronto, Ontario, East Chinatown.
So if you're interested, we do rituals almost every other week. But you know what? If you want to get in on those rituals, you must be a sponsor. That's our pitch.
You do.
I mean, last night's Fox possession ritual was crazy.
It was. It absolutely was. And I wasn't there because I was the one getting possessed.
Right. Let alone that, like, just so people know, we have there's a Sangha group working out of here. That's Buddhist rituals. But I'm going to own it that I'm leading a Goetia study group. That we're going to do Goetia work every week.
Yeah.
Maybe every couple weeks. But there's a whole group of magicians who are a little bit darker, running that because we don't discriminate against any spiritual path. If you have Wiccan rituals you want to run in the center, if you want to come on the podcast with us, you want to record the rituals we have and kind of put them on the internet, we have all the equipment. You should come down here. We are gutting, and we will become Toronto's most premier actual occult happens here store versus occult lifestyle accessories, which most stores are. There you go. I said it. So today we have a very interesting and somewhat controversial topic. A lot of interesting points. We're going to talk about Andrieh Blackwood's Order of the Dragon, Scholomance, which is a book on vampirism, but we have to cover a few points first. That when we were just pre-discussing the show, Andrieh Blackwood actually wanted to talk about. But before we do that, who is Andrieh Blackwood, Zach?
Well, Andrieh Blackwood is a modern pioneer of the violently guarded medieval cult tradition of black magic known as vampirism. Born and raised in Central Europe, underwent initiation as a young man in numerous underground lodges and has inherited the priceless system of initiation and ritual within vampirism. And his name is Andrieh Blackwood, which acts as a talisman.
That's right. And we have to actually even ask about the mask, because that came up. We talked about it. And when we were talking pre-show, there's a lot more, you'd think we're talking about vampirism and maybe it's about cosplay. And why would people...
So Andrea's having a technical issue. So this is where he'll come back on when he can on that. With that, this is where we were discussing previously with Andrieh, like, why is the talisman mask necessary for the type of conversation we're having?
So, hello everyone, and the mask, I think, as you may have guessed, is to protect my identity. The mask actually, and I probably will disappoint a few persons that fetish on it, but have no magical value to me. In my professional life, I work as a doctor in a hospital, and we're having technical issues. Oh, perfect.
Technical issues. We're back.
Yeah, we are having some technical issues.
So yeah, as I was explaining.
That's okay.
Yeah, I work in a hospital as a doctor, and I guess that at least half of my patients will not be in peace with their ideas that their practitioner will write controversial books of black magic. Most of them will probably get scared, particularly here in Eastern Europe, where basically fears of traditional witchcraft and this kind of stuff is more present than in the western part of Europe, where most of people are, let's say, atheist and regard magic as something weird but sympathetic. Here in Eastern Europe, you have people who are very Christian and who might consider my practice as dangerous or to take actions against me. So the mask is here basically to protect myself from this.
Right, and that is a difficult place to be because you've been initiated in this tradition, so there is a little bit of hiddenness to it about just protecting your professional life, protecting your friends and family in association with that, right? So
Yes, and when I look at the world today, and particularly Western Europe, you have the possibility for people to come up to the public, showing their face and presenting themselves as occultists. Here, it starts slowly since a decade to exist with, let's say, what we could call white magic. I don't know if the term is used in the Western world too, but white magic would be energetic work, angel walking, this kind of stuff. But when it comes to black magic, most of the people are still hidden, not showing their face, most of the time not taking part into podcasts or this kind of stuff, just publishing books under a pen name, and that's all.
There's responses, which we saw with like in the UK, especially. Somebody he had kicked off a forum, seriously went and murdered someone. Has never bought for anything, any of his workshops, but took some of the ideas in the forum and took them in the wrong way. Went.
The sound is bad,
The
probably.
insult-like sacrifice of women to a demon. Let me rest assured, no demon wants you to sacrifice women to it, particularly because you can't get women. I mean, no. I mean, and so when we're talking about vampires and stuff like that, we have to say that's not what's in the book. Like, it's not nothing that talks about going to someone's house. The work everything talking about is on the may offend a sensibility of people because they in a worldview that love is light and there is no bad in the world, but world just
the sound is very problematic for me. I don't know if you hear me, but
Yep. All right, sound on my end good, ND?
yeah, on your side it's perfect, but on Andrieh it's like I have a half of the words only.
Right.
Well, we're having some technical difficulties, so
yes.
Zach, carry the.
Yep. So, with that, Andrieh will join us back after technical issues and him fixing that up. ND, this is where, when we're having our pre-conversation, you're stating that there's a history to this, but, it's this, the mass is there to protect your identity, things like this. But you made a very clear point as like what most of the community in terms of a certain community would say, well, this is controversial, right? Like there is a history to this. Can you go into that a bit more?
Yeah, we're talking about a comparison with when I read like some American authors that I like, who have popularized vampirism into the US, I guess, into the last decade. Like, I'm thinking about Strigoi V things and this kind of environment. They made a clear distinction that blood should never be employed and there is no violence link to the practice and this kind of stuff. For myself, I tend to consider that the path of the Strigoi, particularly here in Hungary, in Romania, possess an history of violence. And I must say that it's a violence that happened on both sides, both coming from people, Christian people, who basically killed witches and practitioners of the Strigoi path. And on the other side, of course, violence that may come from people practicing witchcraft. Some are known to have gone a bit, let's say, too far in their practice, and some at a different time period may have used violent practice. As a modern practitioner, I tend to consider that this is part of the history of what we are doing, just like the magic practice by the Egyptian or the Sumerian is different from the magic we practice today because the methods have evolved. We're not basically sacrificing animals anymore, just like the Romans were doing in their time. Laws evolved, practice evolves, and I think it's the same type of stuff when it's come to the path of vampirism. Nowadays, there are plenty of substitutes that can be used. And regarding my own activities, I tend to always stay in the context of the law.
Right. So this is an important piece because you're discussing like it's within the law, people, right? And there is a piece of when reading your material. I mean, it's the misinterpretation there. You're making it very clear in your book that no, like yes, the history is here, but we're staying within the law, and it's not what you probably think vampirism is, because people usually come probably with a perception of what that means.
Yeah, vampirism is an energetic practice. Of course, this energy is, sorry, I'm looking for the English word, but exists mainly in sexual energy, sexual essence, so fluids, in breath, and in blood. And if you are referencing the acupuncturist tradition in China, you will probably find the same things. The meridians follow the blood vessels. So you have this idea that energy is carried by different means inside the human body, and that the human body is like, should I say, a vessel or a tube between the energy of the earth and the energy of the sky. Vampirism is taking this human energy by different means. Most of the time, it's implied touch, but it may also imply a system of visualization and a kinesthetic aspect too, to absorb this human energy from others inside yourself, to regenerate yourself, boost your occult capacities, and in long term have an alchemical work, which is the creation of what we call the body of black light. The body of black light being, let's say, a reinforcement of your own etheric body. And the purpose, final purpose of it is to be able to place your consciousness after your physical death inside this etheric body in order to obtain a certain form of immortality and survival of your consciousness.
Right. So already this discussion is quite elaborate because you're talking about possibly spiritual immortality, which, I mean, other traditions would talk about that, but you're really taking it from a body-centered perspective first, where it sounds like when I'm hearing it, it's like you're taking energy from different places like the air, possibly like blood. That's the most literal piece, but that's not like with the first piece you would jump to usually. And given what I was seeing in the book, there's training methods where you don't even go there because it's you gotta start with energetics, right?
Yep. The blood idea is that the vampire literally take physical blood is both a metaphor and a misinterpretation. The energy is inside the blood, but to consume it, you don't have to consume the liquid itself. You don't have to drink blood. You have to extract the energy from the human body through the support of visualization. And visualization is, in my mind, nothing more than a support for kinesthetic and feeling practice of the mind through the kinesthetic support. You have to extract this energy with your breath, with your intention, in order to take it inside yourself from the body of the other person to enter your own body and have an effect indeed on your cells, on your muscles, on your bones, etc., etc.
Right. So,
But
and many,
let's
go ahead.
for a public that will be listening to me, it will be very similar to magnetism, a reversed form of magnetism. But to do it, you don't have to engage in a very physical action. You don't have to act any act of contrition on the person. You don't have to extract physically something. You will basically do magnetic pass, and this magnetic pass, with the support of your intention of taking this energy, will absorb inside yourself the vital essence of the person.
Right. So, what got you started in this path? I mean, you've been initiated into multiple traditions on this or lodges. So, like, what's the story behind ND Blackwood getting into this?
Yeah, actually, when I was in my younger age, I was studying different spiritual currents, and I was obsessed with the idea of immortality. I was very interested in the beginning by Tibetan Buddhism, for example, and then Chinese Buddhism. I was not satisfied with the Christian explanation, to be honest, and I was thinking about how to obtain something after physical death. But in most traditions around the world, there is this idea that the ego, your personality, your present personality, cannot become immortal. It have to be cleaned somehow by the process of reincarnation or by a process of spiritual awakening. But your ego is always considered something dirty, let's say. It's considered unclean or imperfect. And in every tradition that I put my nose in, there was this idea of letting go of your ego to become something else. And I was very unsatisfied with it. So I turned with time to black magic. And inside black magic, I discovered that there was a particular path to preserve your ego, your memory, your willpower, your skills after death. And that path, particular path, was vampirism. That's how
Right.
I started hanging around with people practicing certain form of Satanism. And in this circle, I started attracting the attention of an elder man who basically turned to me and presented his approach to vampirism. And that's how I really started getting into this.
Great. Great. I think we, Andreas back on. So, ooh.
Yep.
Hello, sir. How's the internet working now?
Seemingly okay so far.
Yep. That sounds good.
So you talked about I was listening, and you were talking about immortality as being one of the goals. So describe what that means, because I think that requires some clarification too. Like,
Yeah.
Because maybe we're not talking about the classical Hollywood immortality either.
No, of course, even if there is some truth into this, people who practice vampirism on a regular base and enter what I call the strain of vampirism or the chain of vampirism tend, from my experience at least, to age very slowly. You know, the person that I was referencing in the previous question, this elder man who took me under his wing or arm, let's say, to teach me. When I met that guy, I thought he was like in his 60s, and turned out after a decade of learning from him, I learned his age, and he was 95. So vampirism tend to not make you physically immortal, but at least you will stay young or ageless for a certain period of time. Now, the objective of what I call immortality is the preservation of your personality, your memory, your skills. You're not going to be cleaned out by a process of reincarnation. You're not going to have to cast that aside to go to a certain place or heaven. You're going to crystallize this by an alchemical work. And with this, you are going to build what I call the body of black light, which is, let's say, your astral body. For those may have to explain what is an astral body, but it is your astral body become your a vehicle for this memory, skills, consciousness, willpower, and of course occult powers. And in the context of vampirism, to maintain this, you will have to feed. You will have to feed because this body is always a bit disintegrating. So vampiric entities, as every other entity, feed, and they feed from energy, human essence being one of the most refined. So by drinking and feeding, you're preserving your body and preventing it to disintegrate. Now, if we want to go a bit further into vampirism, there are also ways to prevent it to disintegrate. You can join what I call a strain, which is basically like a hive of spirit. And basically, when you're into this, you will be fed by the energy of the hive and you don't have the disintegration problem. But that's, let's say, a higher practice. And what I describe in my book, Scholomance, it's the main theme of Scholomance. But a lot of people don't use this methodology and they still have this idea of always being on the hunt.
So how does the hive actually get it? Does it get energy from the vampirizing as a collective? Or
yes, the hive is, in my opinion, if we admit the hypothesis that every layer of this universe is made of vibrations, I guess you're familiar with the idea. The hive will be one of this vibration, and the etheric bodies of any people who pact with the strain or align with the strain will basically be anchored to that layer of vibration. And every member of this hive basically and feed the hive itself, whether they are undead or still living on the physical plane. And every time you feed, you basically feed all the others. So basically, it's a process of being stronger together.
makes perfect sense. Like it's basically, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So this notion of immortality sounds very familiar to the Taoist notion of immortality too, although the mechanism is very different.
Yep.
Yes.
That you remember. Well, in that case, you don't have an astral body, but you do. But you remember from lifetime to lifetime all the components.
And
but this,
what
you
I
become after death, become like a spirit. What?
what I was in
Go
my
ahead.
first years, there was one of my mentors was always referring the Taoist option, and he was referring Taoist immortals as flying dragons. And I don't know exactly where, but there was this idea that people using that became immortal and were sometimes represented as dragons. So make a connection with the Eastern European practice. I'm not sure it is valid or not, but at least it was a very anchored belief here in Hungary.
That's interesting. Interesting. Because the first thought that I had was this is very similar to the goals. Although it seems like as a vampiric immortality, you are not tethered to a body. You are you become a vampiric spirit that could feast off the living, and you're not constrained to the reincarnation cycle either.
Yeah. Yes, indeed, because when you pact with this strain and your astral body become anchored to it, your superior body, admitting they exist, have to go somewhere else. So we admit that this superior body are cut from the crystallized ego that stay inside the string. So this is why I think we are agreed with popular culture when it says that the vampiric practice casts your soul away. Now, there is a mystery to that because we don't exactly know what happened to the soul at this moment.
So, I mean, part of that is true. Then, you know, when we look at like the Dracul rituals and stuff like that, there are other vampiric masters. There is sort of a built into the process an exchange, like you get power. Obviously, you get the need to feed. Because you're feeding the hive and you're feeding the other draconic masters, but you as a after death, you would envision this to be that you would also kind of make a deal with people who are interested. Like you'd give them like occult spiritual abilities in exchange for helping to feed the hive.
Yep. Yes, definitely. It's always a process of exchange. And I think it's Bram Stoker, actually, who had a very deep knowledge of vampirism, was saying something very interesting. He was saying the chain of vampirism is always expanding. And to make the hive stronger, this strain has to expand, it has to recruit new members, and it's beneficial for the spirits who will use the new adept as a gateway to the physical world. It means they will have not only the energetic feeling they receive from it, but they will also have physical sensation inside his body. But for the new adepts, in exchange, he receive powers and the ability to be anchored in the strain. So it's always a process of give and take.
So
One
in
of
the
the things
book,
is that
go ahead, Andrieh.
no, go ahead, Zach.
So with that, you're talking about the different strains and things like this. Could you get into talking about the different traditions you mentioned? Because there's many different traditions of vampirism you discussed, and how that applies to the hive.
So there is, let's say, first of all, I think there is different hives. We have a main line, let's say, here in Central Europe. But there is few different others, one coming from Russia. But there is a lot of other hives on Earth. For example, the Middle East during antiquity have a very strong hive. So I don't work with this one. There is particularly one in Central America, which is new to us, and which have been subject of many books that have been translated in European countries. Stories of shamanic practice with sorcerers transforming themselves into bats. I don't remember the names of the Mesoamerican gods, but it's a very vampire practice. So there is different approach to vampirism, but always the same goals. Let's say it's always about preservation of consciousness, and it's always about draining the life essence of the target to maintain the stability of either the hive, either the line, or either the astral body of a solitary practitioner. Now, on modern time, and I tried to discuss this a bit in the book that we are co-writing together with. There is this new tendency, let's say, of people who don't want to join a hive in particular, but want a form of auto-initiation into vampirism. Basically, use the advantages of vampirism, the ability to travel out of your body, the ability to stay young by feeding your astral body and physical body with life essence, and possibly the possibility of um, survival of your consciousness after death without pacting with any demonic entity or any undead master. And this is a possibility that have been discussed mainly by US authors, if I'm correct. I don't know any Eastern European authors that will go into this, but Michael Ford have discussed it a bit in his Vampire Gate and Akaru.
Yeah, there probably is some strains of of course, it was the U.S. because hyper individuality, and a hive sort of mindset is the opposite of hyper individuality. It's like you're literally agreeing to be part of a collective and work
Yeah,
collectively towards the goal. So
that's something
that
I
would make
see
sense.
when I talk to US colleagues or people who contact me for vampirism and rituals. I have this idea of people asking about individuality question. And I think it's more cultural because it's something that come very less in Eastern Europe. I never heard someone saying, "Oh no, I don't want to be cast off my individuality." And that is something that I have a lot with my US readers.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, the left hand path modalities in North America, I'd say it includes Canada, are very much about um, individuality and
Individual.
kind of, yeah, even to the point of some people will be like they don't want to have any spiritual bindings, like or relationships or um, pacts or anything that would bind them to a
Yep.
spiritual power where there's a obligation. Uh,
Yep.
so that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a cultural difference that I did not thought about at first when I was studying this book, and I discovered that it's always interesting to learn about people around the world and how they see magic, how they got their own vision, and I get to say that I respect that. It's interesting. It exists in Eastern Europe. We have what we call the Morois, and the Morois is basically a sorcerer who don't want to get too much into vampirism. You don't want to be part of to have the constraint of vampirism, and for this reason, he is somehow an hybrid between a vampire and a human.
Mm.
But still, most of them still at the end up in the strain. Let's say.
So if you pursue that path, you don't get the necessarily benefits of the hive either. You don't get the information streams coming from basically from your subconscious mind that tells you how to do things.
Yeah.
But it's possible that you could develop the skills, but it's a much longer road.
Yes. That's not the path that I've chosen for myself, I must say. But I don't have this particular need for individuality to the point that I wouldn't accept to co-work with entities. So when I discovered vampirism, I accepted the idea that I had to team up with beings and other living magicians to basically be able to perform stuff that I wouldn't be able to do alone. But I respect the idea that people are so attached to their individuality that they don't want any link with anyone.
But it still would, like I said, it would still require much more discipline and practice, because
Yes.
you wouldn't be getting the help. Like when you make a spiritual pact with a demon or a strain or something like that, and it's real, you get information like on how to do things. Like it's not book knowledge, but we all know what a real pact looks like. You are getting information, and you're getting a little bit of probably ability from that channel to actually build your own ability from. But without that, you have a much longer road. You have much more practice. You have to have much more discipline. Like you have to do much more trial and error, and you have to have a lot more. Well, you have to be willing to go a much longer road to to get the same sort of boost.
Yeah, and there's still the
There's a real
problem.
consequence to doing this. And it's not a bad consequence, but it means, like everyone who's saying that means they have to work 3 times as hard, and that's okay.
That's fine, and there is still a problem of if you ever stop, um, basically you will return to point zero at a certain moment. It's like you can't really stop because if you do, basically the effect that you have worked on to maintain your body on a certain energetical level will be cancelled. That's a sad problem of this path. Whereas on the other side, if you join the strain, basically you will be permanently fed and connected to the energy of the astral layer that we talked about previously. Problem with this is that even if you have regret, even if you want to break the pact, you can't. You will be always linked to it, and basically your fate is linked to it. So it's pretty much up to you to choose, basically in consciousness, which option you want to take. But to be honest, I would not recommend doing the solitary path and progressive path for people who don't necessarily want to stay absolutely in their individuality. The only thing I can say about this is that there is also people who want to use the benefits of vampirism without dedicating fully their life to vampirism. You can be a great galactic magician or someone doing sex magic and wanting to take elements of vampirism, dedicating, let's say, 30% of your practice to vampirism as a boost, or as a way to stay young, or as a way to basically be able to infiltrate the dreams of others. I don't know, but you may choose to use vampirism as a tool and not as an end goal. And if you don't use it as an end goal, well, this type of work is perfectly fine. It suits you. But if you want to dedicate your life to vampirism, in my opinion, the option of the vampire chain is a royal path.
You might have talked about this with Zach, but how do you get past the natural inclination of most people aren't by nature probably predatory, or they view the world in a way that doesn't allow for, probably I would say, the truth, the small t truth, that it doesn't allow for the fact that the world is in fact predatory. How do you develop? Because if you have to hunt, you have to be able to
Well, in
be
my
a
case,
predator. How do you develop that at first?
I strongly think that it's a question of nature. In my case, probably of education, but I was raised in the countryside. My dad was always taking me with him to hunt when I was a kid, uh, hunting deers and this kind of stuff. I grew up in a place where you had to basically go to the farm and kill your own animals, and it was a part of countryside life to me. So I was okay with the idea since I was a kid. Now, of course, I wasn't okay with, the sinister path of the public image we have of werewolves and this kind of stuff, because when you're a child, you're afraid of this thing, particularly here. But the idea of being on the top of the food chain as a human was always natural to me. And when I had the idea that you can gather life force from human beings to basically prolong my own life and basically be better, I was okay with the idea. I never had moral problems with this. Um, I never felt bad about it. And just to be certain of something, if you want to hurt someone with vampirism, you will have to abuse vampirism. It's possible. I like to be clear on this. This is highly possible. You can make someone sick with vampirism, can be very tired with vampirism, but it's not something that is going to happen because you drink from him once while you are both sitting together in public transport. You have to do it on a regular basis to get the person tired. If you're just doing it one time on any person and basically let the person rest for a few days, what is going to happen is basically the person is going to, well, felt a bit tired for a few hours, is going to have a good night of sleep, and after that, his energetical body will realign and readjust, because that's what happened in any human body. We have a system of meridians that is always working to repair the imbalance, and the imbalance you have created is going to be repaired. If you abuse this and you drink from the same person every day for, like, let's say a week, 2 weeks, or even a month, his body won't have the chance to recover. You are going to break this recovering cycle, and this is where the problems come, where the people is going to get sick and sick until something wrong happened, let's say. But
That's,
well,
that brings a very interesting point up, because like that's probably not what people think. And I mean, I really appreciate the worldview, because it's sort of like I do not necessarily have a just worldview of people believing that, well, that it's just people aren't predatory. People are generally predators too. So that's just a breath of honesty that not justifies psychic vampirism, but basically places it already in the ecosystem of what we are. And the second real thing is that you're getting to something that's basically ethical vampirism. And there's I think I've read other material too that goes even further to say that, and by what I know about, and what Zach knows, who's, a professional Chinese medicine person, there's times at which draining a person's energy actually helps them, or can help them, because it forces them to actually rebuild those energy channels in a more correct manner, or removes blocks in ways that wouldn't possibly otherwise get removed, because the energy is just stagnant. So even the vampirism that you're describing with a casual meeting could be helpful if it forces them to sleep and get their energy flowing again.
And in my opinion, because I did some studies on the Chinese system too. The system I studied work with a system of element, water, fire, wood, and metal. And if you basically drink an excess, for example, of water, you may be able to basically reduce some of the qualities of a person. If a person has too much water in the kidneys, for example, restraining, and you decide intentionally to take this water, basically it will create an equilibrium with the opposite of water, which is fire. So of course, you can use vampirism in some ways to unlock few things. It's, in my opinion, harder than it seems, because acupuncture is a very complex system that works with points and needles, and doing it with vampirism will probably work more like, let's say, a grenade than a sniper rifle. But in any case, just by draining, um, let's say, superficial energy one time per, even one time per week to a person won't necessarily be enough to harm her. That being said, if you want to harm her, basically repeat the operation again, again, and again until basically the energetic system can't recover alone by going to sleep, by resting. You basically break the person, and a person with an imbalance in energy is going to catch a lot of disease one after the other. But that might also turn against you, because you may start feeding from its disease too. So that's why, as an energetic vampire, you have to go for healthy person. You have to go for, let's say, the quick snack on healthy person, and not basically focus yourself on a person and taking his shit in.
Makes perfect
Right.
sense, actually. I mean, in that too, like, once you have vampirized the person, you kind of mentioned that you can enter their dreams, and maybe we could talk about that a little. How does that work? How does, once you get their energy, how then do you kind of translate to enter to dream walk into them,
Well,
after you fed on them?
the dream plane is, after all, a plane of thoughts. Dreams are nothing more than thoughts. When I was doing my first experiences on astral vampirism, I always thought that it was about going into, let's say, a side dimension, like there is in this show Stranger Things. You jump into the side dimension, and I was wrong, absolutely wrong. uh, Going on the astral world is going in the world of thoughts, and going into the world of dreams is being able to go into the world of thoughts. You're going to forget about this physical plane and go exclusively in the world of thoughts to act. And thoughts of people in this planet act as, let's say, an ocean. So you have to go into this ocean of thoughts, target someone through visualization, through kinesthetic sensations, and act on that person basically as you will do in the physical world, to basically take the life essence. Now, people who are sleeping are emanating much life essence than people who are awake. And there is certain psychic state, such as sexual excitation and fear or pain, but I don't use pain personally, that um, create a stimulation of the energetic system. And when people are in this specific state, it is easier to absorb a greater amount of energy. That's where the myth of the succubus come from. Succubus are basically stimulating your astral body and your sexual interest in order to absorb it.
So in one way, then, like some of the other myths of vampirism and vampires in particular, like, if someone's a willing donor, like, essentially that's the myth of the overeroticism you're describing. Like, once they associate that with the vampiric practitioner, like they may give that kind of stuff in dreams or in
Well,
person,
to be
give you the
honest with
energy.
you, the willing donor is something that I never heard about in Eastern Europe. I think it has
Okay.
been popularized in US culture, I guess, by Michel Belanger. Um, I will
Yes.
say that,
Well, and others.
I will say that it is an efficient system. If you have people willing to give you things for free, well, or in exchange of somehow it's basically a good way to feel. It's efficient, it works. Now, in the tradition that I practice, I haven't heard about it here. Vampires from over these latitudes tend to infiltrate the dreams of unwilling persons. They tend to sexually stimulate them during the dreams and then feed from their life force, or use what we call lycanthropy, which is basically the opposite, stimulating a nightmare, placing the person into a state of nightmare and basically feeding from it.
Well, Michelle uses kind of a different the approach Michelle generally uses, is basically one of fame, and then basically that's the doorway to get it. It's sort of the opposite, because she's not afraid. She's not necessarily afraid of people people actually being scared enough to do anything about it. There's a whole lot of authority and public protection that they built up for that to work. I don't know that someone just starting from scratch could build that up from without effort.
I don't know. And in the context where I live, there will always be this rejection of what we are doing. I never say always, but at least in this century, there is still this type of reject of black magic. There is not the romanticized and cool aspect of it. There will always be this Christian defiance. So the system of donor will not probably work here.
Probably not work in Eastern Europe. Yeah. Well, we're about at the hour mark. Do you have any new materials coming out, or any new, maybe not in-person appearances, but anything's going on with Become a Living God that you want to kind of relay to people?
Well, outside Scholomance, me and Equating, that you invited recently, are going to do a ritual on November 13th. Now, I don't know if the show is going to be online since, maybe not, but we are going to have a very interesting group rituals to evoke the spirit of a particular strain. So basically, if you want more information, just go to Become a Living God and see the ritual. Now, I'm going to be part of the Ascent compendium that is going to be released, I guess, in December or in January. And I developed an experience of vampirism that I've been conducted with 4 friends in my prime years. And this was an experience of mixing sexual alchemy with basically the classical practice of vampirism. So it was more like an experience, but an interesting experience of mixing stuff. And I wanted to put that on a paper. Never had the occasion on one of my grimoires because they are very specific to specific themes, like the Draugadróttinn strain or the methodology of vampirism in Draugadróttinn. But in this compendium, I had a chance to place this practice.
Excellent. Yes, this will be out before November 13th. In fact, it's live right now, even with the technical difficulties. The podcast will probably be out next week. And for full disclosure, I am also an author that is in the Ascent compendium. So that way people don't say, oh, you brought him on the show and you didn't mention you're also writing materials with him. I'll be like, that's full disclosure. So now I have.
Full disclosure right there.
Right. If you have a chance, check out that ritual. It should be, I wouldn't say a fun time, but an enlightening one, and very much an empowering one.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me.
So, Zach, Oh, we'd love to have you come back. It was a great show.
Absolutely, it was a great show.
I think I have things to ask about things that were taught to me from my East. I'm Ukrainian. People know that.
Yep.
And my family's from Ukraine, and there was things they said that really resonated with some of the things you were saying, especially from certain family members that I heard the stories of what they did.
Interesting.
So before we leave, what do we have coming up, Zach, at the store?
At the store, we have a Draugadróttinn meditation on December 3rd. We have a basic witchcraft coming up also, class. These are going to be in
basically
person.
say that's basically about grounding and centering using crystals, so you can not go insane through the holidays. It's basically de-stressing the holiday bullshit.
And then we have Your Cups workshop coming up for our sponsors next weekend. And then after that, we'll be having ones the week after. So not directly week after, but every 2 weeks we'll have that. So just check out the schedule. We also have, in the new year, a Luck Series attunement with the Lucky Buddha on 6 different points of luck that he represents. And we also have our Fox workshop, the Taoist Fox Ritual workshop. So
if that's anything like last night, I think everyone's in for a shockingly awesome experience.
Good time.
Not necessarily totally light either, since foxes go both ways. And yesterday's ritual, any take on that? That was pretty intense.
That was intense. I was out.
You got possessed. I was prostrating in front of this fox god, which people don't know is also called a fairy, but a large fairy god, and it was intense. And that was for a luck ritual. But there's other fairies. Not other foxes. Some of which are for death. Some of which are bad luck. Some are all different aspects you could think of. There's different foxes. And they get around the celestial bureaucracy, which means you can get to the immortals without the right ceremonies. And that's what we're going to teach is primordial Taoism through the fox magic. So you can get to some of the other immortals without the initiations, because that's actually what foxes do in classic Chinese Taoism. Once you get their favorite. Yeah, they know someone, they get you the VIP to the back door of their mortals without necessarily have to wait in line. If you know them and you bribe them correctly. And that's what we're going to teach. After that, the other classes coming up that we are going to schedule, there are going to be a formal art and magic class where we teach the foundational aspects of how to imbue art with magic. Not how to do it per se, but how to train to be able to do it, which is more important than how to do it. How to do it's easy. You just magically go talismanically bless something, but that doesn't tell you how to imbue an piece of art or writing as you're actually building it. And instead, we're going to teach you the foundational techniques of how to train, magically speaking, to make this happen. So every piece of art you do is magical and not in some new age magical sense of, oh, all art is magical. I mean, no, it is a magical talisman that other psychics can actually perceive, they can know, and anyone who has any sensibility whatsoever will acknowledge this is a magical talisman. And there is a training mechanism to do that. And we're going to be teaching people that. And we're going to work on that class probably in early March or late February. But we're going to definitely do that because there's been a lot of interest. People have seen the initial techniques. Some of those techniques are actually in the sent articles that I wrote. You could get the article about what some of those initial techniques look like to build talismans from Become a Living God, of which ND Blackwood is also there. So if you need 2 excuses to get the Ascent article. Here it is. There's one thing about magic. There's one I don't call foundational technique of magical art, but it is. And N.D. Blackwood's experimentation with sacred alchemy and vampirism is there in the Ascent book from Becoming a Living God. So there you go. Get the book.
Get it.
I don't think we have a. That's all we have going on. So everyone is a little bit off day, but so all the listeners, which is a few people watching and listen, we appreciate you. If you watch this after fact, we really appreciate you. If you're in Toronto, become a sponsor. There's a whole bunch of different sponsorships levels. Even at the lowest level, you can attend their public rituals. We've made the decision not to allow the public to any rituals anymore for a lot of reasons.
Sponsors.
If you're not sponsoring us, these rituals have costs. And if you're not at least putting minimal sponsorship in, there's got to be an exchange. And if you're not doing it, you're not serious enough to attend. So we're not inviting that anymore. But we do rituals every 2 weeks, different spirits. Me and Zach are both chaos magicians, so we mix it up. We already talked about the fact we'll be doing Goetia rituals, which you could get into for just being a sponsor with an invitation. So I think you can handle it. If I think you can't handle it, I'm not. It's not happening.
We have a vetting process. We have a vetting process.
Yeah, but other rituals such as the luck blessings and stuff like that, when we're just doing rituals for the store or stuff like that, we do rituals a lot. We are going to invite you there, and you should become a sponsor and come out. I mean, the whole point of this is to do magic, not read about it.
Well, right, and then we just have our consecrated altar opened for the public.
Right, that's the last thing. We have a public consecrated altar to the dead in our hallway, which has been consecrated to multiple spirits, lords of the dead, that you can come to and just pray to your ancestors. But we'll release more materials on that. It's an open shrine. As long as the building's there, you can sit. There's a bench across from it. Anyone can come do it, and there's stuff, tools that the community has donated inside that you can come and use this shrine to the dead. If you don't have the room, or you don't feel comfortable doing it in your apartment, we know, because you have roommates, we know Toronto's a hard place to live. There's not a lot. Everyone has space issues. So we have a little shrine. You can come here. The building, if the building's not open, you can call us. We'll let you come in. You don't have to come buy anything from the store. Just come do what you got to do, and then you don't even have to say anything else if you just give us a call. We'd like you to come buy stuff, but you don't have to. And that's part of our community service. The first of the shrines that we're making, there'll be more for the community to come here, and you can just do what you need to do, even if it's even if you don't have the materials. And of course, if you want to get oils or stuff like that during your own process, we have them available. But that public shrine, you don't need to buy anything. It's out there in the public. So come out.
We do take donations.
And we'd invite N.D. Blackwood to come out to our shrine too and come to our center. But he's in Eastern Europe, so when he comes to Canada, we'll invite him in.
Well, a pleasure.
Yes.
As always, people know, I hate to say it as this late to be the voice of reason, but COVID numbers are going up, and so stay safe and well, and stay healthy. And with that, this has been Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole. Have a great day.
All right.